Hello, and welcome to AP Table Talk, a podcast where we explore board games and what makes them interesting to us. I'm your host, Brian Ng, and joining me directly from the front lines of the educational battlefield, my co-host, Dr. Dave Ng.
You know what, Brian, I was going to groan at that, but that was actually pretty good, so thank you. Thank you, I appreciate it.
I try to do like one ribbing and then one like just funny.
How many ChatGPT prompts did it take you to get to that one?
No, you know what? I should be. Why am I not using ChatGPT for these? I sit there and I waste my time coming up with intros.
I know, right?
I'm not using.
Sitting there,
I'm
using
out of the regular workforce. I'm not using all the shortcuts that I would be if I was working.
Using all your puny human powers instead of your massive ChatGPT powers.
Yes. All right. So how are things going?
All right, man. I'm ready to talk. Let's talk about mechanics.
Yeah. So this episode is multi-use cards. That's the episode. That's the mechanic for this episode.
Yep.
So we'll start off with our definitions.
Sure.
Okay. So
you go first, Brian, with your personal definition.
Okay. So what are multi-use cards? I have one definition and I kind of break it up a little bit. But generally, I would say it's cards in a game that have multiple actions tied to them. So, or multiple ways that you can use the cards, but you have to choose one of them. You can't use all of the actions. I do have an example here. The example I use is a game that we've both played, an unexpected game that I like, which was Risk Star Wars Edition.
Oh, yep.
Yeah. So for those unfamiliar, it has nothing to do with Risk. It is closer to the Star Wars Queen's Gambit game, where you're kind of fighting multiple battles at the same time. And without getting into all the rules, essentially one player's Empire, one player's Rebels, and you have a deck of order cards each. And on each order card, there'll be 2 or 3 different options to activate units or fight on different fronts. And you're essentially choosing, I think you have like a hand of 6 and you play 3 of them. And each time you play one of them, you have to choose one of those actions to use out of the cards. So you kind of pick the one that will benefit you the most or whatever. And I think that was kind of the most like simple, straightforward multi-use card game that I could think of quickly that we've both played. Right. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm angry because I'm like, yeah, that is a really great multi-use card game. I totally forgot about it until you brought it up right now. I was like, oh man, I want to play it.
Yeah, I think that was a big surprise, like one that we enjoyed because it kind of, I mean, it was released by Hasbro. It's more of the like, the box looks like more of a Monopoly or that type of game that we kind of, not that those games aren't good, but we've kind of moved on from those types of games, or at least they don't generally hold our attention as much. But I thought that was an interesting find. I don't even remember why I had that game.
I think you had it because
I don't know if somebody got it for me or something. Because I wouldn't have, even though it's Star Wars, I don't think I would have bought it.
Right. I remember playing it. I was like, this has nothing to do with Risk. It just has Risk on the cover.
Yeah. So I think someone must have gotten me that game because they knew I was into board games and they knew I like Star Wars. And I probably rolled my eyes a little bit when I got it. But then
it was a good game.
It ended up being a great game. Like it's a great game, especially like kind of a game. It's a pretty straightforward game. I think that's one that probably like my oldest daughter could probably start playing that one soon. So, now when we talk about the multi-use cards, actually, you know what? Let's do the official definition first, and then we'll get into some of the minutia for this episode.
Okay. Well, Brian, I hate to break it to you, but the official definition for multiple use cards from Board Game Geek is, quote, multiple actions are shown on a card, but only one can be used, unquote.
Okay. That's a very short definition.
It's pretty straight.
But I think that summed up. And okay, you know what? And they say multiple actions are shown on the card, right?
Right.
Okay. So we had a very quick discussion in our prep for this episode. And we talked about games where you can use the cards for another action, but it's kind of a generic action. So the example I have is Seven Wonders, where you can use the cards for whatever the actual action on the card is, but your other option is that you can, I don't know if they call it selling it, but you can essentially discard a card on your turn instead and take 3 coins as kind of you can always do that action.
Right. Yeah.
It's not, but it isn't written on the card. But I would say that's still technically multi-use. But for the purpose of this episode, I did not include that in any of my examples for multi-use card games.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Yeah.
And I mean, even if it said on the card that you could discard for 3, I still just didn't, because it's not quite the same spirit, I think, of what we're talking about with multi-use cards.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that that is a concept that's based more in the game and less in the card, right? It's a game mechanic that says you can exchange this card for 4 coins, at any point.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and kind of, we didn't speak about this one, but as I was kind of going through multi-use card games, another one that has a very similar feeling that I also excluded from multi-use card games are where the cards are also used as a resource. And by that I mean, so have you played San Juan?
Oh, that's the card game of Puerto Rico, right?
The card game Puerto Rico, yeah.
No, I have not played it, but it's on my list.
Okay, so yeah, again, it's kind of a card game version of Puerto Rico, and in that one, it has the same thing. You're doing your action selection, and everyone follows, and you can build buildings in that one. And so in regular Puerto Rico, you build your is it plantations or whatever, and then you can get resources on them. In San Juan, same thing. You can build your cotton plant or whatever, and to signify resources, you just use the card face down. You use any card face down on the building.
Yep.
So yes, you are using the card for multiple uses, but I did not include that as multi-use card. Because it doesn't, you're not really making, that one's even less so, because you're not even making a choice. You're just taking a card and using it face down as a representation of resources.
Well, I'm willing to debate that point, but I want to save it for a later part of the episode.
In that game, because you're not even picking a card from your hand, you're taking a card from the deck face down and just putting it on to represent.
I see. Okay,
if you had to choose one of your cards, that is more... But you're not even really making a choice. You're just taking a card and using it to represent a resource as another component, which to me is even less of a multi-use card. From what we're talking about.
Agreed. I'll put my pitchfork down.
Okay, so that gets through our little definition there with some footnotes for the episode. So we'll move on to some examples then, our major examples.
Yeah, major examples, and we're going to lead with a die roll here.
All right, roll for initiative.
I gotta do virtual roll because I don't know where my D20 is, but it's nowhere near the desk.
No problem.
But okay, I'm rolling online, so you tell me when you're rolling.
Just do the countdown.
All right, 3, 2, 1, roll.
Okay, I got 17.
I also got 17. Oh, it's a push. That's the first time it's ever happened.
Not. What, are we just re-rolling?
Did we re-roll? I mean, that's what
we didn't really have we never planned this.
I know.
I guess it's
a roll off.
All right.
3, 2, 1,
let's roll it off.
All right.
10.
I got 11.
Okay.
What'd you get?
So you can go 10.
10.
So
okay.
You can go ahead first.
Okay. So we're on major examples right now. We're talking about the first ones. I had a lot of difficulty, Brian, with this episode because I feel like multi-use cards it's present in so many games. I mean, your definition, I think, narrowed it down a little bit more. But for me, I had a really tough time thinking, like, what is the very first multi-use card game I've ever played? I couldn't go back far enough in my gameology to come up with that.
Right.
So I had a tough time, but what I did instead was I tried to find one of the most, I would say, quote unquote, rudimentary, like multi-use card games out there that I feel like this one's going to be common to a lot of listeners, which is, and we just finished our game on Board Game Arena, which is going to be Forest Shuffle. So Forest Shuffle uses those cards in multiple ways. Like we played it. It's a game where you are trying to build like a forest using cards that score points in multiple ways. There are tree cards that make up your forest, but then there are animal cards, and those animal cards can either be tucked like above the tree, below the tree, to the left of the tree, or to the right of the tree in like different configurations. So I think like if you're interpreting, like you can only use one card, like there's multiple options on it, but you can only use it one way. I'd say Forest Shuffle is probably one of the most like, mass available games, I would say, that
Okay.
have that mechanic. So it's not my first, but I think it's the one that would
Right.
be most accessible to a lot of
Okay.
listeners. Yeah. How about you?
Okay. So for my first, so I agree on you. I was kind of thinking about the games, and I did try to choose, at least for our examples, I tried to choose ones where the multi-use cards had a more significant role in the game. Now, in certain examples, it was more or less to that degree. But the first game that I could think of that I played that had multi-use cards is actually, it's not one of my favorite games. It's a cooperative game. It is a fairly popular game in the board game hobby sphere, and that is Pandemic.
Okay.
So, for those not familiar with Pandemic, it's a cooperative game. The goal is you're trying to stop the spread of diseases throughout the world by, I think you're discovering cures. You each have like asymmetric roles on so you each have cards, and you're not allowed to share what cards you have. And on your turn, you take actions, and the actions are like move, building research stations, treating diseases, discovering the cures. And of those actions, a couple of them. So when you move is one of the actions in which you use your cards. And your cards have a color and a location on them, I think are the ones at least used for moving. And in order to move, you have to have, or one of the ways you can move is a direct flight to a location where you have the card with that location and you can move directly to that location. So the board is a network of locations across the world. So you can move to adjacent cities without a card. You can take a direct flight to any city as long as you have that card, or you can charter a flight. If you have the location that you're currently on as a card, you can use that card and you can fly from that city to any city.
Oh, okay. It's been a while since I played. So this is all new.
Right. Yeah. So I had to kind of refresh myself. So that is one of the uses is for moving, but the other use for those cards are as well is that if you have, in order to create the cures for the diseases, you have to have 5 cards of the same color. So, and then if you're at a research station, one of your actions can be to discard 5 cards of the same color in order to create the cure for that disease. So that's another use for those cards, basically.
I see.
So that is one where you have to kind of make that choice of, do I want to use this for moving, but I need to keep these yellow cards because I still need 5 yellow cards so I can make the cure, that kind of thing. So, so I think that was the first, or at least the first multi-use card game that kind of falls more into what we're talking about, or the feel of what we're talking about today.
Yeah. Man, I forgot about that. Like, that's a really good example of multi-use cards, but it's been years since I played Pandemic. So I totally forgot.
Yeah, again, it's a super popular game, but it was never my favorite. Just again, mostly because it was cooperative, but I felt there was a lot of quarterbacking whenever I played that game.
Yeah,
so I just
really
never
easy to
liked
quarterback
playing it too much.
Yeah.
All right, so we will move on to the next one. So you want to go ahead with is it your favorite?
Yeah, this is number 2 for favorite. So I'm glad we had that discussion at the very top, because this one, and we talked about this in the pre-production meeting too, because I really wasn't sure if this game counted as multi-use cards, because like you are, it doesn't really, I don't really consider it an action, but after you've like kind of couched your decision in like the framework for how you classify the multi-use card, this is actually coming from your hand. This is actually one of my favorite, like I would say, like trading games, and it's Bohnanza.
Okay.
Because the multi-use card here, it's not as in depth as I think other games. It's not even as in depth as Forest Shuffle. But the reason I like Bohnanza is because the game's all about trading, and you may have like really valuable. The game is about like trading beans, and you sell these beans for the most amount of money, and money's how you win the game. Since you cannot rearrange the cards in your hand when you sell them, it is opportune sometimes to try to get rid of cards by trading them. But when you have beans planted in the game, it allows you to, once you reach like a certain set level, like 3 or 5 or 7 of the same bean, you get to harvest them. When you harvest them based on that set, you get to, you earn money from them. And the way the money is earned is the actual card itself. So you take that card, flip it face down, and then the face down, like face on the back of the card is the coin. So that's what actually counts. But now that I think about it, I think it actually serves two purposes here. One, since it's face down, it's a coin, it counts for points. But it also means that one of those beans in that set that you've selected does not go back into the reshuffle pile. So it's actually making it that kind of bean in the game to collect later much more difficult, because you've basically killed one of those cards in your scoring pile. So I would go with Bohnanza for my favorite.
Yeah, that's Uwe Rosenberg, right?
Yep.
Yeah. That's yeah. You know what? I'm wondering if I played that before. No, I think I played Pandemic before that. But yeah, that's definitely one I played a long time ago. Okay, so on to my favorite. Actually, we were just talking about this before we started the episode.
Yep.
And I think I brought this up in my favorite category many times. Sometimes I just mention it, but then use another one so that I don't talk about it all the time. But in this case, I think it makes a very good use of multi-use cards, and that is Dune Imperium. Yep. Whether that's Dune Imperium or Dune Imperium Uprising, they're basically very similar games. So I won't go through all the rules of that game, but essentially, it's a worker placement deck building game, and part of the deck building is kind of your standard deck building. You've got a hand of 5 cards, or sorry, a deck of 10 you start with, and you draw a hand of 5. And on your turn, you are playing agents, which are your worker placements. But in order to place an agent, you play one of your cards, and on the cards there is symbols on the left side, which correspond to groups of locations. So you have to have a card that has I'm just going to call them colors, essentially colors of the location you want to go to. But in addition to that, there are 2 boxes at the bottom, one called the agent box, which when you play the card to place your agent, it has an effect that occurs when you place that agent. So it could be to draw additional cards, it could be to gain resources, or to trade resources to gain troops, or some examples basically. It could be anything. And so you're choosing to use that card either for playing agents, so generally you're playing either 2 or 3 agents around. Now the other part of the card is, the other use of the card I should say, is once you've completed the agent phase of the game where you've placed all your agents, you do a reveal turn. And the other box on the card is the reveal box. And that has other effects on it, which could be to gain persuasion, which persuasion is the currency used to acquire more cards in the deck building part of the game. You can gain resources, you can deploy troops, things like that. It can increase your battle strength. So all the cards from your hand that you do not play in the agent phase are presented in the reveal phase, and you get all the effects from the from the reveal box. So the entire round is kind of a trade-off of the cards you want to use in order to do the worker placement you want, but also the cards you don't want to use so that you can gain the effects from the reveal box. And I find it to be one of my favorite implementations of multi-use cards. It's a little thinky, but it makes you have to make a lot of really interesting trade-off decisions in that game.
Yeah, I think that is the reason why I really like it, right? Because it's not just about choosing what cards you want to play. It's actually, I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Brian, it's like splitting your cards, right? It's like, okay, I want this group of cards to do this, and then I'm not going to use these cards because I want to use the discard ability or whatever is the
exactly, yeah.
Ability,
but then it's like, but I need spice, so I need one of the yellow locations, and that has to come from this pool of cards, and yeah,
it's a good decision framework, right?
It's really, it's just really interesting and really fun, which again is why it pushes that game up for me.
Right.
And actually, I made a little note in my show notes here because I was going to guess what I thought your favorite multi-use card game is.
Oh, what did you think it was going to be?
But I'm not familiar with the game, and I only making this guess from the list of multi-use card games on Board Game Geek. And I know it's a game you like, I think, or at least I think it's a game you like a lot, is I thought you were going to pick Raiders of the North Sea. Or is it the other version of that game that you like? But I'm not familiar with how I'm not familiar with that game, so I haven't played it yet. So I don't know how the multi-use cards are in it, but
I forget because I played it once, I think, years ago.
Okay. I thought that was one of your, or is there's another version of that game? That you
well, I mean that
you prefer, right?
It's Shem Phillips. He's the designer, I believe. And he
Right.
has designed a lot of games that are like that use multi-use cards like that in multiple different ways.
Okay.
We might have to look this up, but like, no, I mean, like, I just haven't played
Is
it
it
enough.
Raiders of Scythia or something like that?
Raiders of Scythia,
Um,
yeah, that's the one I have. But
Scythia, yes. Which is basically Raiders of the North Sea, right? But a real implementation.
but in like it's like Mongol invaders, I believe, is the theme.
Right, right.
No, no, I
And
can't
again,
remember if
I
that
don't
game
know
had
if
multi-use cards.
I don't know if the multi-use cards carries over to that version of the game or if that's only in North Sea or
I
what.
mean, it
But
might only
yeah, I
be
might have
North
to.
Sea. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah,
Yeah.
because again, those are two that I've been wanting to play with you, but we've never had the opportunity to get that one to the table together.
No, no. Maybe for the next
Anyways,
convention.
yeah. Okay, well, we can move on then to your most noteworthy or biggest game
Okay.
in your opinion.
All right. So for this one, I really wanted to say Bonanza, but I wanted to talk about
Okay.
Bonanza as my favorite. So I chose a different one. So
Mm-hmm.
again, like I was having this episode has been a real challenge for me. So I had to really focus down on this one. I think that it seems like multi-use cards is an easy feature, I think, to add to a game if you have limited components.
Right.
Or if you want to make if you want your players to make decisions based on component limits. So like you were talking about that before, Brian, with Dune Imperium. So
Right.
it is, I don't know if it actually has like enough cachet to be considered like the biggest, but we played this
Okay.
one of the last times we were together. It's Oh My Goods. Do you remember that game? Small card game.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I
So
actually
that is
enjoyed it. I mean,
yeah.
yeah, sorry, go ahead. I just saying I enjoyed that one. I don't know if I would own it, but I actually thought for the little small box, it had some interesting decisions in it.
Yeah, it definitely has some interesting decisions. I think that it being like a small box card game only really leans into the fact that like, like these are the only components we got. So let's see if we can make, like best use out of all of them. So I think that small box, the card game factor, like makes it like I guess easier to get to the table because it's not as like daunting as like a large box game. But I still thought it was pretty
Right.
crunchy. Like there was enough decisions in there to make it like pretty meaningful for me. So again, I would have filled this answer with Bonanza, but I used it as my favorite. So mine for most noteworthy or biggest would be Oh My Goods.
Okay. So on the same note, yes, I agree. I had some games that I kind of wanted to put into each section, and I kind of was going back and forth, but I figured there's enough variety in the way the multi-use cards that I would talk about them somewhere in the episode. So I essentially went to the Board Game Geek rankings to decide on out of my choices. So the one I chose as the biggest slash most noteworthy is Gloomhaven, which is almost like the opposite. You have a very small box. I have like the largest box.
As big as you can get.
So I haven't played it a ton. Basically, just filled in a couple turns for someone. But it does have a very. Are you familiar with Gloomhaven? Have you played it at all?
I mean, I know about Gloomhaven, but I've never played it. It's not really a game.
Yeah,
that
I just
is
mean
my
okay.
Yeah.
So it is. It's a dungeon crawler game. It's essentially D&D in a box where you don't need a dungeon or a dungeon master. And the multi-use cards portion is basically on each of your turns. You take a turn by playing two of your cards, and each of the cards has a top part and a bottom part. And I want to say generally the top is an attack and the bottom is a movement. So you are choosing a combination of your cards out of your hand to take an attack from one and a movement from the other in order to do whatever your action is on your turn. And it creates a lot of, again, that interesting decision because you'll have a card that has a really strong attack, but also might have like a move 5 and jump action also. So you can't have both of them.
Right.
You'll have to take, or you do have two strong cards, but then you're blowing essentially 4 strong actions in one turn, right? And actually, now that I think about it, it has multi-use in that sense where you're choosing the top or the bottom of each card, but also cycling through the cards is the way they monitor your stamina in the game as well. So it's also kind of a counter almost.
Oh, okay.
Which I'm just kind of like throwing that one off the top. That just kind of came to my head now. I don't actually remember the exact mechanics of that, but yeah, the main thing was the kind of the choosing the combination of two of your cards and choosing the top action part of one and the bottom action part of another card, and having that combo, which I thought was was a very, it's simple in its implementation, but does create again very interesting decision space.
Yeah, now I kind of want to play it. Like it was never a game I wanted to get to the table because I'm like, one, I don't think anyone in my group has it, and two, it's just like I just hear it's like a bear to set up. Like that's half of the
Yeah,
experience,
so
just setting up the game.
I've been on the fence of like, do I want to get the like, because there's the digital version.
Yep. Yep.
But then it's just like, but if I'm playing a digital version of that, there's so many other D&D games.
Right, right.
So I don't know. Maybe we'll do some tabletop simulator with it or something.
Maybe. I mean, like if someone else wants to bring it and host it, I'm all for it.
And set it up and like and run it basically. Yeah. Yes.
You do the work. You do the work.
My sister-in-law has it. My wife's sister has it, and she's played a little bit, but I don't know if I would ever like get to her place to play it. So
yeah.
Okay, so that's our major examples.
We're gonna go into Beyond the Basics now.
Yeah.
So we're rolling again.
Okay, so let me just move my notes here. We'll do our roll for initiative again.
All right. I wonder if it'll be a push again. We'll see. Ready?
Yeah, really. All right.
3,
Yep.
2, 1, roll.
Oh,
got 9.
Right. I got a 2.
Oh, you whiffed.
All right, you definitely beat me there. Yep.
Okay, so we are in Beyond the Basics right now. First topic, we're going to be talking about integration with theme. So we're going to examine multi-use cards to see if it is flexible enough to fit in with different themes, game worlds, and stories. So here's, I really stretch Bri to try to find different examples for each one of these categories in Beyond the Basics. So
right,
I could see multi-use cards being used with theme if like I think the closest theme would be like resource scarcity or resource transformation. Because again, like a lot of the examples we've talked about are like using your cards as resources, as like actual like things you earn or just actions or just things that like your player character can do in the game. And I think that the game that has multi-use cards that I feel like is the cleanest implementation of this would be Furnace. You remember Furnace?
Yes. Yeah, I do. It's really fun. I'm kind of like chuckling over here because I have almost the exact same things written down. Like the only really thematic thing that I could think of was resource management, and Furnace is the example that I have here.
Oh, you have Furnace too?
But go ahead.
Should we just talk about it?
That's my example. Yeah, because that one I think is, you go ahead and we can just both talk about it.
Yep. Because like with Furnace, it is basically there's the auction component, right? And it's been a while, Bryce, so correct me if I'm wrong. I only watched a playthrough video.
Here, I'll run down the game and then you can go back to your points on it.
Okay, yep.
Because Furnace is up there in one of my top games that I like. So Furnace it's engine building kind of Euro economic game. It's based on like an auction and tableau building, I guess. So essentially in a game round, there's the auction phase and the production phase. So in the auction phase, players, you lay out a certain number of cards based on the number of players, and each person takes turn bidding, and you bid. Each player has discs numbered 1 to 4, and you're using that to bid on the different cards. And you can only bid once on each card, and you only have those. Well, there's other ways to acquire discs, but essentially you have those 4 discs. When everyone's done bidding, whoever bid the highest on a card gets to take that card and add it to their tableau, and all other bids get what they call compensation. So on each card, there is some resources at the top of the card and some other either resource or benefit on the bottom of the card. When you win the bid and you get to take the card, you essentially use the bottom part of the card, and when you get compensation, you get a multiple of what you bid times whatever resources are at the top of the card. And then once everyone's gotten their cards, place them in their tableau, you do an activation, you do the production phase, which is activating all the cards, and then rinse and repeat. So yeah, you go ahead and talk about whatever. Go ahead and finish your point, and then we can discuss from there.
Right. So I'm really glad you brought that up, right? Because again, it's been a while since I had played Furnace, and I really needed to kind of like a refresher on the mechanics. But what I think is interesting here is because I'm really concentrating on like the theme of resource scarcity and resource transformation. What I think makes this game really interesting overall is that like for most of the part, for a lot of auction games, you're trying to win the auction. There are a few games where you don't want to win the auction. And in this case,
Right.
both winning and not winning the auction is a tactical decision because sometimes I've played it in the past where I'm like, I don't want to win this. I just want to be able to get this, like I don't need the card. I just need the resource transformation right now. And like,
Yeah, it had that card has 2 oil on top, and I need a bunch of oil, so I want the
to get my
oil.
machine.
So
Yeah,
you have
yeah,
to bid on
exactly.
it, but you
Yeah.
don't actually want to win it.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that,
Yeah,
and again, it's only those two parts of the card, right? It's only the top part or the bottom part. There's nothing on the back that I
yes.
remember, right?
Well, sorry. There is you can also flip the card if you want, but that's once you own it. You can upgrade the card. But
Oh, okay.
it's no
And it
longer
becomes more
so
efficient or more powerful.
it more powerful.
Okay.
So I'm just going to cut in a bit. And what
Yep.
was interesting about the multi-use cards in this sense is that they are only multi-use during that auction phase. Once the card is won,
Mm-hmm.
they are no longer multi-use anymore, which I thought was interesting as well. They become just an action card in your tableau. And
Yeah, like
well,
static.
so the payout happens. They're just an action card. So it's only multi-use when they are a communal card. Once it becomes one player's card, it becomes single-use card, which I thought was also interesting use of multi-use, like kind of a different design method for it.
Consideration. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I think that's the cleanest implementation for me. I know you talked a lot about Furnace Ready Bar. Was there anything else we didn't cover?
Yeah, again, it was more just I had it as actually an example in here and an example later on, just from a different design implementations of multi-use cards. But yeah, multi-use card mechanic itself can serve it's really flexible, so I think it can serve many functions, which doesn't really tie it down to a theme, but it is easily able to fit in, but doesn't. I don't think it generally adds to the theme itself, the mechanic itself.
Yeah, yeah, I would say so.
It's just kind of one of those very basic mechanics as far as a building block of the game. So it doesn't really take away or add to the theme, but you can use it for whatever theme.
Right.
Because it's more about just making decisions with it.
Yeah, which I think is, that's part of the mechanics of the game for most games, I would say.
Right. Okay.
We're on depth and strategic options now. All right. I'm leading off on this one.
What are we doing here? Sure, yeah. Or it doesn't matter. Or do you want to swap or do you want to lead off on each one? I'm okay either way.
Okay, well, let me lead off in this one. I want to see if we have the same game again for strategic options. Okay. So again, I'm looking at this from the resource scarcity transformation perspective. So for depth and strategic options, we're looking to see if multi-use cards offers meaningful choices and decisions for players, which I think, several of the games we talked about already do so. So I think that this is really good for the resource constraint component. And I think instead of limiting the quantity and type of other physical components, like we've seen in other games with meeples or other physical resources like cubes or something else, you can add them directly to an existing component like the cards. And I think a game that did this really well, and we played several games of it actually on Board Game Arena, is Jump Drive. You remember Jump Drive?
Oh yeah, right. I forgot about that one.
So I think I owned a physical copy of it a while ago, but I included in part of a trade. I never got to play my physical copy. But what really stood out for me was that the way that you use the cards in Jump Drive are to, again, build something, but you pay for those buildings with other cards in your hand. So you really got to make a decision for how you're going to build these cards. But it, at least for 2 players, it was a super fast game. And I was like, wow, I'm losing at light speed right now. Because I never won any of those games. And I'm like, I don't know how, how does everyone have their engine going so fast, with the cards?
Right.
So mine would be Jump Drive. I don't know if you chose the same game here, Brian.
I didn't actually have an example in this one. I just kind of had a general kind of idea. So as far as the whole purpose of multi-use cards is to add meaningful choices or trade-offs to the game. So I think that generally if it has them, the good implementations are adding those meaningful choices and making you pick those trade-offs and generally offering more strategic options, right? So I think that it's more just a general statement that it's likely to be a positive to adding depth and strategy to your game.
Yeah. There's a caveat there, but I'm going to talk about it in another question because I did think about that, about adding those resources to the cards. Okay, so that was anything else for depth and strategic options?
Not really. Again, I think just again almost as the base mechanic itself is adding options. So
right.
I feel like that it's kind of like all encompassing for that topic.
Okay. Do you want to
So
lead off
balance
on
and
balance and
fairness.
fairness then?
Sure.
Okay.
So when I think about balance and fairness in this one, I kind of see that when you have multi-use cards, it generally helps eliminate weakness in your cards, because having more options is never going to make it a weaker position. You just have the chance that there could be something better you can do, right? Then, like if you had one option as opposed to multiple options. Well, if you have multiple options, it can never be worse than having only one option, right? So I think that from a balance standpoint, yeah, it's not going to make things weaker, but you can run into the potential drawback being that you could run into an early dominant strategy if you're able to acquire cards that can give you a really good combo early on that push you ahead, because again, you're never really going to get weaker, but that gap of how strong your position is could push ahead depending on how those choices and those cards are made. Like if this particular combo with the choices that you pick on those cards gives you just some really powerful combo. And I mean, I've had an early game in, I'll go back to Dune Imperium, where I was able to acquire a really powerful card early on. Yeah. And because my deck was small at that point, I could cycle that card back often. Yeah. And it essentially gave me another worker placement really early in the game.
Yeah.
Which
that's huge though for a worker placement game.
Again, right? for that game where you only have 2 or 3 work placements and the game only lasts at most 10 rounds, having an extra action every round is a huge advantage.
And if you can get that as early as possible too, right?
Right. Yeah. The earlier, the more additional actions you're getting over everyone else.
Yeah.
And I think it was like an unhindered action either. Like you can't be blocked.
Oh, wow. That seems OP, but I'll allow
it. I'm not sure if I'm thinking, I think this was in the second time I played the game, and I'm wondering, did we miss a rule and I shouldn't have had as much persuasion at that point? But I was able to acquire that card, and it ended up, I just dominated that game.
Right.
So sorry, back to balance and fairness. Obviously there is the luck element of the cards you get or whatever, but I do think one of the potential drawbacks, depending on the play testing there, is unforeseen combos or things like that. But there is that potential of just really powerful combos that just push one player way ahead.
Right. So for balance and fairness, I think your example is really good, and I have some other examples of other games I want to talk about, like the action economy and like changing resources and everything. Right. So I know that especially if you're going to include resources on a card, and those cards are going to be limited, and generally if you include resources on a card, it's not like fungible anymore. You can't remove that resource like later in the future. It's tied to that specific component. The game that I am referring to, where I really struggled this, and Bri, you actually helped me play test this way back in the beginning, was Air Sloop. You remember Air Sloop?
Ah, okay. Yes.
Yeah. Because
I'm not sure if I know the final form of that game, but I know I've played many variations of it.
It doesn't have a final form. It just has the current form. So you played the current form. And basically, remember, like, there was a point where, Air Sloop is the first game that I designed by myself. And it was a game of pick up and deliver. So you have your little airship that's going around a board to pick up cards. And then cards were designed to have like different colored districts on them. And based on like the district that you fly through, you pick up resources of that color. But the backs of cards allowed you to like return them to a trading post to collect that card for points. So I ran into this whole issue and like not designing anything else prior to this. I'm like, well, how do I balance a card? How do I make sure that, like some resources could be really scarce one game, and they could be, you could have a surplus of resources the other game. And it was very difficult for me to do, but I knew that I really liked this component. We talked about this before, Brian. I really like games with multi-use cards because I feel like they make really great use of like limited components. So for me, I think balance and fairness is incredibly important, but it's even more difficult, I think, when you tie like those resources that are inherently tied to usually the balance of the game to, like a card that cannot be changed, because like that card will always be worth like, 3 oil or 1 oil or 0 oil or something else. And I think that's a hard thing to consider.
Yeah, I think that's always a tough one when we've talked about any of our game designs is just kind of figure out that balance. And when you have multi-use cards where the cards can be used in multiple different ways, I think that just increases that complexity of like how do you balance that card?
It's it's tough. I know.
Right.
Still playing it. Well, I haven't played in a while, but it's tough to
Right.
balance out because again, you can't
Yeah.
change the
Yeah.
resources in the card after you print it out.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay. We'll move on to player engagement and fun. So again, it kind of links to what we've already been saying. Generally, multi-use cards, I think, increase the complexity of a game in general. Which I guess one of that would be a potential for like analysis paralysis, just creating more decisions. And again, I think there are some good. We've discussed some of the games that are simpler that kind of eliminate that. Like I think Risk, Star Wars Edition was a good example of.
Mhm.
Yeah, you're increasing. I mean, it is the only decision though. Really, is which card you're going to choose, and then picking the action on that card.
Yep.
And so it kind of streamlines that decision, even though it is using multi-use cards. But I think that is something to maybe that to look out for with multi-use cards. But I think all in all, for both of us, our sentiment is that we really enjoy multi-use. Like I like making that trade-off decision and weighing off the benefits of the each option on the card is that to me is what is fun about multi-use cards.
Yeah.
And in any of the games that we've talked about.
Right. And I, not to belabor the point because you talk about Dune Imperium a lot, but I really like the fact that like with your hand of cards, it's not like, oh, I'm only for this turn, I'm only playing these cards. It's like I consider like you're dividing into lots, right? This group of cards is going to do this, and then this group of cards is going to do this. So you're always going to get something. It's just how you want to, turn the dial on what you get.
Right, and that's a good point you make is that from a kind of a reward system method is that even though you have to make a trade off. It can be designed in such a way that you don't feel like you're losing out all the time. I mean, you are losing out on a decision, but you're still gaining something, even though you had to use the card one way or the other. And it's just balancing out that like which thing is gaining you the most and where you need it that time kind of thing. And I really enjoy that.
Yeah. Over to me.
Yeah. Again, I didn't have a specific example. Because I think our examples kind of illustrated that. So yeah, if you have anything else to add to that.
So I think that when I was able to get one game to the table that had multi-use cards, like a physical play of the game. And then this one, I don't think it's as good as an example of the other games we talked about before, but I played Fantastic Factories because I backed it on Kickstarter way back when. You played Fantastic Factories before, Brian? I don't know if you had backed it. I don't think so. Time. Fantastic Factories is a little bit like Furnace, actually, in that you're trying to generate like victory points, which are goods. So you buy like specific like components of a factory, and you're turning like metal and energy into goods. And those goods get you points and everything else. The multi-use cards in the game are how you purchase different things. So you get like a hand of blueprint cards, and you can use those blueprint cards to build like specific components of your factory. Or you can spend those blueprint cards to buy different blueprint cards that may make your factory run more efficiently. You can also use the individual types of blueprint cards you have to buy like contractors, and contractors are like an instant ability that gets you more resources or allows you to do something that may be against the rules. So I think that the main fun element for Fantastic Factories for me is just discovering those combos. Or just like you were talking about before, Bri, which is like, okay, well, I have this factory that like can make a ton of goods, but I don't have enough electricity. But I can spend these cards in such a way which will give me a ton of electricity this round, and I'll pump out all of these goods like just at like this one time. But I can't reach that point until I've set up my factory in such a way to produce all these goods in like one like a single motion.
Right. Yeah. All right. Do you want to start us off then on variety and replayability?
I will. Okay. So for variety and replayability, you talked about this again. We're going back to Dune Imperium here, in getting like the action efficiency from your gameplay, and I think that one of the games that I think is dependent on this is something where you need to really make the best use of all your actions because you only get 9 of them in the game, and I'm talking about the White Castle. Had you heard of that, Bri, or played it before?
I have not played it. I've seen like reviews and rundowns of that game.
Well, it's a good one. If we can get to playing it, or if we can play it at some point, I highly suggest it.
It's on my list for sure.
Yeah, it's a good one because again, it's only 9 actions. I had this last time I played it in person. I had this like epic turn where I was able to do like 20 things in one action because I was able to chain everything correctly. But the way that we're talking about variety and replayability here, we want to know if there's enough depth behind this mechanic that gets players coming back for more. And I think like if Fantastic Factories allows you to find ways to chain different actions together, I think the White Castle is like that on steroids, because if you get the right combo and the right cards and the right place and time and resources, you can really churn that out. And I think as like a construct of resource management and resource conversion is I call it, and I've read about it, like the concept of faucets and drains in games. Like the faucet being how do you introduce a resource into the game, and then the drain is like how that resource is spent or consumed that allows you to get something else in the game. So when it comes to doing that in like the White Castle, again, there's other mechanics that are related to it, like specifically like dice drafting, but the multi-use components, the multi-use cards in this game allow players to either get like an instant ability now or an ongoing ability later. And I think that's the aspect of the White Castle that makes it different, at least, or noticeably significantly different each time you play. That I think gives a lot of hobby board gamers at least something to come back to in the future.
Yeah, that's on my playlist too. So maybe we can try and do it at our next meetup. Yeah. So yeah, I more have just kind of general thoughts on this. It's the same thing as like you're adding more decisions, you're adding more combos, which if you kind of equate the combos as more possibilities of variety of variety of paths to take, things like that, adding replayability. I generally think it does. Now, how it's designed and how meaningful those choices are how well the design is. But again, the games we've talked about so far, and most of the ones that we find appealing, like that is what is appealing about multi-use cards in those games, is that you're adding that variety and that making those decisions tough is I think the thing that we enjoy.
Yeah, which is weird, right? Some people don't like having tough decisions.
Well, I don't like them in my real life, but in board games.
But in games, yeah. When it's a game and it doesn't matter, I want the decision to be
exactly. Tough. If there's no actual real life consequences, make those decisions real hard. Okay. You want to go ahead and lead on our final category here?
Sure. So
innovation and originality.
Yeah. So for innovation and originality, what we're looking for is, does this mechanic offer something new on a regular basis? And this kind of speaks to what we had talked about before with variety and replayability and balance and fairness. I think this is very much like this is a hobbyist category for me, because I think that people that are really into tabletop games are going to want to know, like, is this game going to do something different that, like none of the other hundreds of games in my collections really does. And I to be honest with you, I don't think that multi-use cards are a really innovative mechanic. I think that it's about the data that's printed on the cards and how you use them. I think that it's more of an aspect that's focused on, making the best use of your components. But I will say that I think one of the heavier games that use multi-use cards that I was able to research, I didn't get to play it because I don't have a copy. No one in my group does, is, I got to pronounce this, Mottanai, Mottanai. It's by Carl Chudyk, Chudyk.
Okay.
Had you heard about that game?
Not familiar with that game. Nope.
So this game, like, we talked about multi-use cards before. We talked about, like, with Gloomhaven, there's the top and the bottom action. With like Furnace, there's the the main action and the tertiary action. With Mottanai, and I think that's how you pronounce it after I watched the video, it is like there's a front and back of the card, and there's also like top, bottom, middle, left, and right like components. And when you get the card, you got to determine how you do you use this for like resources, or do you use this for action or anything else? I watched a playthrough, just not even a playthrough, just a how to play, and I was like, I don't know if I really want to play this. This is more decision making than I really feel comfortable doing in the game. Like for me, like I like a certain level of decision making, but for this, it just felt like paralyzing. So I think when it comes to innovation, this makes it so that like there's really tough decisions to make in a game of Matanai on a regular basis. And I think like the decision space is just, like for a card game is much larger than you would expect. I think that if you're trying to introduce someone to multi-use cards for the first time, you probably want to play like Bohnanza or Four Shuffle or what did I say before? What was my other game? I'm looking for it now. Oh My Goods. Like Matanai is just
Right.
like it is. If I had to choose one game to represent multi-use cards, this would probably be it because that is like the main draw for the game overall.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of agree with you. I do think that there has been innovation in the implementation of multi-use cards. Like even in the games we've talked about, we talked about Furnace it's a multi-use card until the auction is over, and then it's a single-use card.
Mm-hmm.
We have ones where there's again, a Dune is multiple ways that those multiple trade-offs in different areas that you're making on that card. Another game that I haven't got to talk about yet, I think I mentioned it to you before. I don't remember if you said you've played it, is Lagrange.
We talked about it, but I have not played it yet.
Okay, so that's one where that's an older game. It's your typical Euro, so it's farming themed and goods delivery. So it's kind of a Euro economic game as well, and it has various parts of the board that kind of have different mechanics. But the multi-use cards is in building your actual like farmhouse. You have each player has their own board, and there has gaps on the board, and when you get cards in that game. So the game takes place in 6 rounds, and each round you add 1 card to that board. And the cards have a top, bottom, left, and right side. And you can choose you choose a card, and then you choose which part of that board you want to tuck it to. So for example, the left side is your field. So when you tuck it on the left side, you're adding spaces to your field on your farm, and then it allows you to harvest different goods, for example. But if you choose that card and you tuck it on the top instead, it's the market barrow, and it gives you unique orders, I think it was, so that orders that only you can fulfill. And if you tuck it on the right side, you actually extend your farm, which that one has kind of various benefits. It could be increasing your income for deliveries. It could be increasing how much you get in a harvest, or there's also like livestock that you can get more offspring from your livestock. Or finally, you can tuck it in on the bottom, which is special workers. So each card has a different worker on it, and each of those workers gives you a special power. So it could be a one-time use, just get a bunch of goods, or it could be a persistent discount on all upgrades or bonuses to other actions and things like that. And so each card, you're kind of trading off in completely different areas. And the way that the multi-use cards is very different. Now there's other games that have, I think you were talking about a game where you could tuck it in all the different ways too. I can't remember which game you brought up, but yeah, we've seen that. Yeah. I in our follow episode, I talked about Glory to Rome.
Yep.
So that was one where it's the same idea. You could tuck it in on all the different things, and it would give you different follow options. So this one is, you're building up your farm. It's only one aspect of that game, but it's just implemented very different and very original at the time for that. Since then, I mean, I guess Glory to Rome came first, actually, but I mean, we see that in other games like that one you mentioned. Expeditions also has kind of a tucking in the different sides to make use of the cards.
I realize now from my notes, Bri, that Glory to Rome is designed by Carl Chudik, who also designed Matanai, which is the game. So he's really into multi-use cards, apparently.
Yeah, there you go. And he likes that tucking mechanic as well.
Yeah.
I think that there is some space to, because it is a very basic, almost component level mechanic, I think there is room in having an original way to implement it. And I mean, as we always say, the games that we tend to like are combining mechanics in new ways. And things like that. But I mean, I think that's going to be kind of a blanket statement on all the topics we talk about. But that's always fun, is seeing it, is where you're kind of having that and how you can roll that in with other. So again, I mean, we used Dune Imperium a lot as an example, but you're rolling in that multi-use card with your locations for your worker placement. So you have to make that decision in conjunction with that, which was, again, I don't know if it was the first, it probably wasn't the first one to use it, but it feels like a new innovation and it feels original in that game.
Right.
Yeah, that's all I've got for that.
All right. Should we go on to our bonus round? Do you have anything
bonus
for that
round?
one?
Yeah, I didn't really have much else to say. I think I was really just I think I got to all the games I wanted to talk about. I did have another kind of runner-up another runner-up for most noteworthy.
Okay.
But I ended up passing on it. Was another one of my favorite games was Brass Birmingham. Again, really high on BGG as well. So for those not familiar, that one's it's a network building game, another economic game. And that one is you start with 8 cards, and on each turn you use one of the cards. And once you're out of cards, the age ends. There's a second age where you essentially do the same thing, and then the game is done. So the cards are kind of a timer for the game. The multi-use in that one is a little bit different, but it wasn't as multi-use, or it didn't have that same multi-use feeling. So that's why I ended up going with Gloomhaven over it for most noteworthy. But the multi-use in that one is that when you play the cards, you are essentially playing each card for an action. You can play any card you want for most actions. The only exception is when you want to build. So the map is a network of locations where you're building different industries on the locations, and you have to connect them through rail or through port. And when you want to build, you have to either there's 2 types of cards. There's location cards and there's industry cards. So you either have to have a card with the location you want to build at, or a card with the industry type you want to build. Any of the other actions you do, which could be building the railroads or selling or taking a loan or any of the other things, you can spend any card you want, but you do have to make that decision on which cards you want to make sure you have so that you can build at the locations you want or build the industry types you want, because you don't get to draw cards back until that age is done.
Yeah.
So
tough decision.
Again, it is multi-use, but I just felt it felt less multi-usey than the other examples.
Is that an adjective? Multi-usey?
That's the technical term.
Yeah, technical term. Reserved for true hobbyists. Multi-usey. I had a couple other honorable mentions, Brian. Should I go down my list?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So like I said at the very top, like I had a real tough time with this episode, and I think it's because that I really associate the multi-use card with more of a component than a mechanic. And yes, I feel like that was, I think it took this discussion, Brian, to really kind of open up my horizon to like what you could do and how you classify multi-use cards. But some games that we had played and done some research in preparation for this that we didn't mention so far, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Brian. Number 1, we played this online, Isle of Trains. You remember that?
Isle of Trains. It sounds familiar. I'm trying to remember the game.
You can pick up or deliver goods or people. Cards could be used as like...
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yes, I remember.
Had a physical version of that, played it online. Wasn't a total fan of the online version, so traded that away. Also, I had Bruges, Bruges here, Brian.
I've heard of that one, but I have not.
I believe that's a Stefan Feld. Hold on. Let me, before I perjure myself, let me see. Is this a Stefan Feld game? It is a Stefan Feld game. This is one, again, like, I guess... a traditional take on multi-use cards. We could use a card for like workers or goods, or to get rid of like some sort of penalty that Stefan Feld had put into the game, because he likes to put in penalties into the game, and you got to use his card to stop that penalty. There's Maracaibo. Did you ever play Maracaibo, Brian?
That's another one I've heard of, but I don't think I've played it.
Okay, this is this is Alexander Pfister, and he also designed Great Western Trail, which we played.
Yeah.
This one's another use of like multi-use cards again for resources, or I think buildings. Last time I checked, I don't think I ever got to play Maracaibo, so I just watched playthrough video in preparation for this. We talked about it before, but I don't know if we discussed Compile, Brian. You told me about Compile.
Right? So that one's kind of funny. I mentioned it. It was kind of a newer game coming out soon at the time of this recording, because I had watched a quick review on it and just kind of skimmed. It's kind of multi-use. I don't know if it's multi-use now that we've kind of gone through the kind of defining it, because I don't think you actually choose. There are multiple actions on the cards, but I don't think you actually choose the action. The actions that get executed are situational on how they're executed. I don't think you choose the actions that you're from the card. Like you always do the top action. I think the middle action happens when it's shown, when anytime it's shown, and the bottom action happens like immediately, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I remember watching.
So I don't think you actually make a conscious choice of which action you want to do. It's just that there are multiple actions, but in our definition of multi-use is that you're making that trade-off. You're choosing one of the actions and not being able to do the others. And in that case, I don't think that falls within our definition.
I see. Okay. And then you talked about Glory to Rome. And the last two games I had here was Lost Ruins of Arnak, which I think we covered for our deck building episode.
Right. And I think it falls similar. I know a lot of people compared that game to Dune Imperium at the time when it came out.
We know which is the superior
and it's kind of it's the game for people that don't like direct conflict. That's Dune Imperium.
Right. Yeah. And then
because it's missing that portion. Well, when I say missing, for me, it's missing that portion.
The combat portion, yeah. And then
the direct conflict. Sorry?
I had Apiary on my list too, but it's been like over a year since I played Apiary. It's the B game from
Apiary, there is a small component of that game that has some multi-use cards. I didn't end up using that as an example. So essentially you can get, I'm just going from memory here, you can get these seed cards and you can choose to trade them or you can choose to use them as a resource, or you can plant them for an ongoing benefit.
Okay, that sounds familiar from the last time I played it. Yeah, but those are my honorable mentions. We didn't mention specifically, but I had included in the research for this episode. Yeah,
there was, I mean, again, I think it's used in a lot of games, but it's not generally the major focus in all the games. So it was kind of a lot to sift through to find the ones where it was kind of like a focus of the game or a larger portion of the game.
All right.
So that's all I've got on the topic today. You have anything else to add?
No, that's it. This was was a challenging topic. I'm glad we got to talk about it, but hopefully all of our listeners out there learned about some new games with multi-use cards.
Yeah. That wraps up our multi-use cards episode of AP Table Talk. If you'd like to hear more content like this, please be sure to subscribe. You can also check out more of our content, projects, and other information about us at universityxp.com.
Thanks for joining us. We'd also love it if you took some time to rate the show. We live to lift others with learning, so if you found this episode useful, consider sharing it with someone who could also benefit. Until next time, game on.